Okay, what's up everybody and welcome back to yet another video podcast. It's not going to be a very long one. I'm Billy Smith. If you don't know me by now, I rode a couple of years in a amateur team, continental team. Then I moved up to World Tour. I skipped Pro Continental, then I went back to Pro Continental, and that's where I currently am with Burgos Biace, and before I was with Team Katusha Alpecin. So in today's podcast, I'm going to discuss some things about the Tour de France that the reason why I do this podcast is to show some point of views which I might understand better than the viewers or the cicloturistas, like we say in Spanish, out there. So I hope I can clarify some things. So first of all, a little bit of a controversial topic. I am a little bit of a Cavendish fan since I've been small, and I'm also a Lance Armstrong fan, but there is something which kind of makes it uncomfortable during this Tour de France is when you watch the Tour de France, we always want to see the best riders in the world compete against each other, as it's the world's biggest bike race. However, over the years, I don't know if you guys noticed or ever thought of this, is that many big riders prefer sometimes to start doing Vuelta or Giro, because doing the Tour de France is immense amounts of pressure they put on a rider, and it's on an extremely high level, whereas in Giro you need to have a really good level, but it's not as intense or stressful as the Tour de France, and Vuelta has really good roads, so fighting for position is not that difficult, although the heat there, and there's quite a lot of tough climbs, there's not as many sprint stages. So take that into consideration. The thing with Cav, great victories. I salute him for that. I think it's victory number 33. So he's catching up with Merckx. He doesn't like to hear that. Obviously, it puts much more pressure on him. But with the lead out he has with the Koenig now, especially Morkov in front of him, his timing is so good, and he just needs to kick off of Morkov's wheel to get that victory. But that's not an excuse why he's winning. He's obviously a great champion. However, I would like to point out the top 6 best sprinters that we've had the past 2 years are all not at the Tour de France. And remember, Caleb Ewan also crashed himself out, so we would have seen a great stage there. I hope he heals really well from his collarbone that he broke. So let me just quickly point out who these riders are. It's Bennett, Ewan, Ackerman, Groenewegen, Merlier and Demar, and I also think Fabio Jakobsen is missing from that list. He's also, so if we had all these guys there, it would have been absolutely a crazy bunch sprint. Unfortunately, we won't see that this year. So I'm just pointing out that scenario because in one of my earlier Twitter feeds, I did ask what is seen as a comeback. Is it simply a dip in performance and then performing well after a few years? Is it coming back from immense injury? Is it just coming back from injury? What do you see as a comeback? So that will be interesting. Okay, so let's quickly talk other things, what's Pogacar's weakness and how he can be beaten at the 2021 edition of the Tour de France. So the problem is most of the big climbs are at the end. They're not really early on in the stages. So I think the Mont Ventoux stage is a good opportunity, and the stage that goes into Andorra. What I mean by this is it really needs to be quite flat with some hills early on, because then a big breakaway can form, like we've seen the one whereas Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert was in. That could have been really interesting. A lot of people asked on that stage, why did, who was that? Trek, they had 3-4 riders in that big breakaway. Why didn't they pull for Nibali? Everyone was really upset, and with good reason they didn't pull for him. He was dropped quite early on, and we know he does not have his legs like he's had in the past, so that's why they did not pull. But if these guys started pulling for him, that gap could have even grown bigger. And then also the tactical problem is that everyone is looking at Van Aert, Van der Poel, and they start attacking. So the gap could have been much bigger in that breakaway. But then also you had, when Richard Carapaz attacked in the back, you had Movistar chasing, which completely doesn't make sense. And it kind of refers back to the documentary we've seen on Netflix, where we think that they might have some personal vendetta against him because he did leave on bad terms with Movistar. But maybe they were just, I have no idea why they were chasing, and they actually caught Carapaz on the line. But that also closed the gap to other guys that were in that breakaway. And they basically are just doing UAE's work for them. So if we have in the following days a lot of crosswinds like we've seen in today's stage, Pogačar was a little bit isolated with not many teammates there with him, or a big breakaway with a dangerous guy, GC rider in that breakaway gets away, that might succeed, and that's kind of the only way you're going to beat Poga. So that's his only weakness and the team's weakness. However, there's another big problem. If you look at it, at the general classification currently, all top 10 riders are in different teams. So what are we going to see? The closer we get to Paris, we are definitely going to see sometimes teams 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th in general classification chasing a dangerous breakaway. Why? Because they want to secure their position in top 10 on GC. It is the biggest bike race in the world, so take that into consideration. Okay, so other things I want to discuss here. I don't know if you've seen with DSM, I don't know what's going on there, but a lot of their riders have been leaving before their contracts end. So it can be coincidental, but I doubt, because it happens with so many riders. So I kind of am starting to think it might be, the problem might be with the team. Because after some news today of another rider that left, people started noticing, and here's another example. Dumoulin, Matthews, Kittel, Hirschi, Barguil, Tiens, Brandt, Ensing. They all left before their contracts ended, or on a very bad foot. So that's another thing to just take note of. It might not be as relevant to this podcast. Okay, another thing, jury report, and I share all of this stuff. It sounds a little bit random, but it's just to give you some insight as to the way we as professional bike riders see it. Okay, so the UCI obviously trying to make as much bucks as they can, like banning sock height, their opposition. Once again, I've never seen a crash. In 10 years of racing, in big bike races where someone has crashed a peloton in the aero tuck, I've never seen it. Maybe you believe that it sets a bad example to the younger children out there or whatever. I don't believe it. Very strange. They can rather start banning the fans holding signs next to the road that cause a lot of crashes now and in the past, but they've not do that, and I don't know if it's enforceable. It seems that it's not. There's too many people, but they also did not want to make an example. So, bit weird. Okay, but on that note, I see one of my teammates in Katusha Hollenstein was fined 200 Swiss francs for urinating in the public. Okay, that's also really weird, because sometimes when you gotta go, you gotta go. You gotta go. So how can you find someone that had to urinate on that moment? Or someone who has to urinate right now because there's an important section coming up where they don't want to be badly positioned and they have to urinate now. Otherwise, they might have to urinate when things get tense. And I know over the years that when I really had to urinate or take a pee, sorry, I'm saying that word quite a lot, I don't focus that much in the bunch, and it can cause you to maybe make a mistake and crash. So keep that in mind. It's a difficult rule, that. And then, the littering, sometimes a rider drops a bar accidentally. That happens. I don't know how they differentiate whether they're going to fine a rider or not, but they have been finding the riders quite severely. I think there's other stuff they can rather do. And finally, to end off this podcast with, I don't really like speaking a lot about watts, because I've seen it many times over and over where they post a rider's file or watts or whatever, and it's so phenomenal, and they blow it up completely. And I was in the same race, and I know it was not that hard. So I don't know how those power files came about or what they're trying to do. Maybe the rider did, but most of the time the watts they say that was needed to go over that climb, I've passed in groups of. I've done a top 30 in Queen stages in La Vuelta, in really difficult mountaintop finishes. And I can tell you I didn't nearly have to push as much watts in certain groups as they've said. But one great example which tells you how high the level has been in this year's edition of the Tour de France is the Ghent said, normally with those values I can ride the whole peloton to pieces. Here I was 100 meters behind in a group of 70 riders, and I started from the front row. When you're not in the peloton, after that, it's clear that the general level is just much higher. He did his best 10 minutes and he actually got dropped, and there's still 70 riders in front of him. And we know how strong Thomas de Gendt is. So yeah, the general level is extremely high, but you've got Pogačar, which is kind of a head and shoulders above the rest. However, also, once again, with the Cavendish scenario, I refer back to the Pogačar scenario, where many of the top riders are not here or have crashed out, which is really, really unfortunate and pretty shit. Especially Rogla. I believe there would have been a great battle between him and Poga. I even heard from riders off camera behind the scene that said Rogla is so strong they can't even train with him. He just does his intervals on his own. They even can't hold his wheel. So he was really in good condition. Bernal opted to do Giro and obviously won. And many other riders like Richie Porte, Geraint Thomas, they all crashed out. And that's really unfortunate. So we're missing a really good GC battle. But, it's still 2 weeks to go and anything can happen. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. If there's any questions, leave it down below. Once again, I give my opinion and I'm not insinuating anything at all. We're talking cycling, so don't be angry at me for pointing out certain stuff. Don't get offended. And I love banter as well, so I might be sarcastic in certain points. But I hope you enjoyed it. Until later, cheers.